Hey there, friends. As most of you know, I was in Houston, Texas this past weekend at the NRA annual meeting. I drove over there Thursday, I believe it was, a couple days after the Uvalde shooting. And I put a brief about the Uvalde shooting out earlier last week, but wanted to wait until the dust settled on this simply because there were so many facts coming out. As many of you will note that there was a lot of inconsistencies in the reporting, commanders coming out and kind of debunking what the previous guys had said. I know the governor of Texas was really outdone because he said he was giving some bad information. So I kind of wanted to let those things settle a little bit and not jump on the incorrect facts. And I'm glad I did. Not only was I out of town, but I didn't have the opportunity to look at all this. And I've taken a pretty deep dive in this since yesterday to be able to look at all the facts. And one thing that's clear, it looks like law enforcement may have done some things in here that are definitely against protocol and certainly against what most people would have done. Now, many of you will know that I am pro-law enforcement in many ways, but just like everything else, not every lawyer is bad. Not every law enforcement guy is bad. They're not all good. Not every cook is a good cook, but they're not all bad either. So we've got people who have issues in every line of work. There is no line of work that is immune to bad people or good people. If it's a field that you generally don't like, I can assure you that it's not all bad people in that field. We're not real big fans of the ATF, but I'm pretty sure that maybe there's a pretty genuinely decent person that works for the ATF somewhere. So that's my point on that. So I'm not trying to paint the Uvalde law enforcement officers with a broad brush to make it sound like all of them are bad, but there are certainly some issues that need to be addressed here. What I like to do is I'd like to go through a timeline of events, and we can make that assertion as to what the real problem is and see some real big issues that we might need to be addressing with law enforcement. I'm all about any kind of effective reform in any line of work, but just doing reform for the sake of doing it is not the right thing to do. I feel like we've got to make some changes in protocol to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So let me get right into that. At 11:28, the killer crashes his Ford F-150 into a ditch. He shoots at two people at a funeral home across the street. At 11:30, a 911 call is made to report the crash and the shots fired. 11:31, the school resource officer mistakes a teacher behind some cars behind the school as the killer. The killer, in the meantime, is hiding behind some parked cars. 11:32, shots are fired at the school from the killer. 11:33, the killer enters the school, fires multiple rounds in rooms 111 or 112. Not sure exactly what room it is. Most of you guys will know that those are adjoining rooms, so not sure exactly right now. Of course, the law enforcement officers will know, but we're not sure exactly which room that was. Now, significant to point out, 11:28, first shots were fired. This is whenever the killer wrecked his vehicle and shot at the two gentlemen across the street at the funeral home. 11:33 is when he entered the school, 5 minutes later. So 5 minutes transpired. 5 minutes is a long time, especially whenever there's shots being fired. 5 minutes transpired from the time that guy fired those first shots till he entered the school. 11:35, three Uvalde police enter the school through the same door as the killer. There is a minimal shootout where two of the officers have wounds that grazed them. Three more officers enter the school at that time. Between 11:37 and 11:44, 16 more rounds are fired from the killer and potentially people who are exchanging gunfire with him. Really don't know right now if that was an exchange of gunfire, just saw that the rounds were fired. So I don't want to make an assertion that he was in there doing whatever, the killer himself. There is a possibility that he was exchanging rounds with somebody. Don't know that yet, and I will correct that whenever I find out. 11:51, more law enforcement officers arrive. Now, right now, there's tension in the air. There's parents who are accumulating. Parents are able to respond. This is a small town now, 15, 16,000 people. You can drive across the entire town in 5-10 minutes. Everyone has heard about what's going on. Everyone is heading over there. Parents have started to gather, and they're asking questions. You know, I got kids in there. Is everybody out of the school? No, not everybody's out. Well, why are you guys in the parking lot? 12:03, 19 more law enforcement officers arrive. Now, something I want to point out, and this is the thing that's really heartbreaking to me as a parent. At 12:03, a 911 call is made by a young lady that's in the room where the killer is. This child makes that 911 call to please help her, and she's pleading to please come help us. 12:05, some children are evacuated from the other side of the school. 12:10, that little girl, the same girl, calls 911 again at 12:10, pleading, please come in and save us. 12:13, the little girl calls back again, please come save us. Again, law enforcement have not made it down to that room to rescue those people. There was a statement that was made by the commander on site that said that he thought that the killer was barricaded in a room at some point and that somehow the children were safe. How he made that assumption and that jump, I have no idea. Again, I'm not assuming what the man was thinking, but I don't know how you make that correlation, because if there are children still in the school and literally one of them was on the phone with you, you know there are live children inside that school, and your commitment should be to save those children's lives, and that was not done. 12:15, Border Patrol Tactical Unit arrives. 12:16, the little girl, the same little girl, calls back for a fourth time to call 911. Please come save us. We know y'all are out there. Please come save us. She's clearly alive. 12:19, another little girl besides this one calls 911. 12:21, the killer fires again. We don't know what he shot at, if he was shooting at law enforcement or if he was murdering more of the children that were in there. Now, at this point, I'm not sure if at 12:21, those shots that were fired were the final shots by the killer that were fired. But one thing that's important to point out, 11:28, this killer fired his first shots at the two men across the street at the funeral home. At 12:21, this killer may have fired his final shots. That's 53 minutes since the first shots were fired when he fired his last shots, with all these law enforcement personnel on the scene. That's 48 minutes since he entered the school and people knew there were children who were still alive in there. 48 minutes from the time he entered until he may have fired his final shots. Because at 12:50, officers finally breached the classroom door, shot, and killed the suspect. At 12:36, this same little girl had called back for a fifth time and was on the phone for this entire time when the shooter was finally shot and killed. At 12:47, she was still on the phone 11 minutes after she called for the fifth time. Now, I want to point this out. We already mentioned from the time the killer fired his first shots to when he fired his last shots, potentially. From the time where they finally neutralized the threat at 12:50, this was 82 minutes, 1 hour and 22 minutes after this killer fired his first shots before he was finally neutralized. 1 hour and 22 minutes. And this was 77 minutes, 1 hour and 17 minutes after this killer had entered the school until he was finally neutralized as a threat. Friends, this is absolutely unacceptable behavior. It's inexcusable what happened here. As a parent, you've got to be outraged, but imagine being a parent of one of those children who were in there. Whether your child survived or not, the terror your child went through during this ordeal, clearly the law enforcement officers there broke protocol. If you'll remember, after the Parkland massacre, at the time, law enforcement protocol they've been instructed to wait until backup came, the right gear to take on the shooter and all that good stuff. And because the law enforcement officer in Parkland pretty much saved himself instead of going in there and trying to confront the shooter and stopping him, they changed protocol after that. And their protocol, according to Stephen McCraw, head of the Texas Department of Public Safety, said that standard law enforcement protocols call for police to confront an active school shooter without delay rather than waiting for backup or more firepower. He said it was a wrong decision, period. I can't imagine what's going to come out of this. I know that some people have their hair on fire right now because they're ignoring the true root causes of what causes a person to decide that they want to kill somebody else, and they're focusing on inanimate objects. Right now, a compromise cannot be a compromise of giving up something like a Second Amendment right just to appease some people, knowing full well that that's not going to change anything about people deciding that they want to take the life of another person. That's what has to be addressed. You know, the work has already been done out there. I've done the work on it. I wrote a book on it. There are ways out there to not only identify these people, just like this person, every single characteristic that I outline in my book, this guy was a part of. Not only that, we can see the symptoms of how these people are evolving, how they're becoming more and more dangerous. There are warning signs every step of the way. Every single time we see something like this happen, we hear people over and over again, oh, the warning signs were there. Well, yes, they were there. They were continuously there. They're there every time we have some kind of a mass rampage killing like this. And people around these folks, they continue to ignore these things. there's going to be a lot of debate in the comment section below about law enforcement. But law enforcement people, as hard as it is to hire people right now, because the general public in many cases turned on law enforcement a few years ago after George Floyd. At some point, law enforcement recruits are going to have to be vetted even deeper. I know it's hard to get people through the door, but I don't know if it's a psychological exam or what. But I'm shocked that people would not just disobey what the on-site commander was telling them on this site. I know a lot of good law enforcement personnel, and I know people who would have been willing to risk their jobs, their pensions, and everything else to go in there and save those babies from that madman that was shooting at them. I don't know how they had such a large group of people that would not go in there, such a large group of law enforcement that would not go in there. Again, far be it to me to second guess what those guys were thinking when they were out there in that type of situation. But guess what? That's not my job. My job is not to go in a school and neutralize a shooter. I didn't apply for that job. These guys chose that job. They chose the job knowing that this day could one day be here, and it came, and they failed with their responsibilities, and this is a shame. Something has to be done to put better people in positions to better manage a situation like this and not let it fester for an hour and 22 minutes.
Let's go, Brandon.